everyone, and happy Friday, and welcome back to another episode of Mavens of Manufacturing. It's been a while since our last episode with Kathy Miller, but that is the new cadence that I am doing. And today we're going to be talking about soft goods manufacturing, which is one of those parts of the industry people touch every day and still manage to underestimate. We wear it, we carry it, we sit on it, it protects ourselves, it helps us pack things up, and we rely on it in industries far beyond fashion and clothing. Then someone hears the word sewing and immediately it makes the work seem a little bit smaller than it actually is, as if industrial production, material behavior, fit, grading, construction, and repeatability are somehow less technical because the product is flexible. Well, my guest today is going to bust all of those myths, and she is super passionate, and I love her personality and her energy, so I'm super excited to have her here. Rocío, hello, how are you doing?
Hi, Megan. Thank you so much for welcoming me into your podcast. I'm super excited to be here. I'm hoping we will get to dispel some of the myths that surrounding soft goods. And as you well said, it goes well beyond fashion and clothing. I mean, people don't even know half of the products that, require sewing skills.
Yeah. And I can admit right off the bat that I do not have very good sewing skills. I believe I tried, it was back in 7th grade where they had, we were entering middle school, so the schooling system was kind of set up a little bit differently. So you had K through 5, and then 6th, 7th, 8th, and then 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. So when we entered that 7th grade, they opened up all of the extracurricular or electives, as they call them, to all of us, so we could see what we wanted to figure out and what we liked. And I had sewing, and my sewing teacher I was not her favorite student by all means. I ended up breaking a sewing machine, several needles. It was a very difficult class for me. So I appreciate the skill set that goes behind it, because I do not possess that skill set. But if you give me a saw, I can definitely make something out of wood for sure. But Rocío, can you just introduce yourself and give us some information about your background and your history, because I find it fascinating. And again, it's something we take for granted here in manufacturing and engineering. And even in the United States, I don't think we have the presence of textile manufacturing like we did before. So if you could dive into a little of that.
Yeah. Well, hello, everyone. My name is Rocío Evenett, and I'm the co-founder of Sewing Incubator. I started working on textiles really as a game. I got a little toy sewing machine when I was 3 years old, and it was more like a gluing machine. And I don't know if you can see, it's still there in the background.
Oh, that's cool.
It's like one of those little Barbie ones. And right next to it is my G.I. Joe, my first fit model. And that's pretty much how I got started. It started as a game. I would watch my mom, make stuff for us. And then, from there, I remained interested in it. But I started wanting to make stuff for myself. So that's how I got into pattern drafting. Okay. So pattern drafting is like the function of building the blueprint for the cut pieces. And it just kind of like came natural to me. I was always, interested in origami, and my mom used to buy me a lot of crafts and activity books to do, stuff with paper. So it always came natural to me. So eventually, I ended up getting a book on how to make hand puppets. And that was my first pattern making book, because you have to, learn how to, make the body, to fit your hand. And then from there, it always came natural to me. It literally evolved from playing to a hobby to then a business. And once I figured out that the popular girls in high school were willing to pay a small fortune for custom clothing, yeah, that definitely kept me interested.
That's awesome. Well, I mean, you describe yourself as a soft goods engineer. So for someone who hears sewing and then immediately underestimates the work, how do you explain what soft goods engineering actually involves to them? Because I feel like it's more than just looking at a pattern. Like there's different fabrics that you work with, and different fabrics I'm assuming are they work differently, and they're not, some might be easier to sew than others or put together than others. So what does a soft goods engineer entail? Like what's all involved
Well,
with it?
I mean, for industrial purposes, you really have to be able to anticipate some of the behavior of the different materials you're going to be working with, but you also
Mhm.
have to be able to anticipate how that fabric, those textiles, may behave as you're trying to put them through assembly. And for that, you have to also figure out, okay, what's the right thread, what's the right needle size, what's the right tension, what's the right machine.
Mhm.
Because I mean, even though we're not a huge company by any means, but at last count we have about 30 different types of sewing machines, and they each perform a specialized function. So what a lot of people don't know, for example, when you have a pair of jeans, when we're dealing with
Mhm.
workwear, for example, a pair of jeans requires eight to nine different machines, and
Wow.
they all produce a different stitch.
Mhm.
So they're specialist machines. So a lot of people, if you don't know what machine is better for what operation, what type of assembly,
Mhm.
you're going to be wasting a lot of time and money, and you're not
Yeah.
going to be very far in being able to achieve your target in terms of performance, fit, you know, uh, cost.
Mhm.
So there is a lot more that is involved, and as you just said, it is unfortunate that I feel that over the last, I want to say over the last 25 to 30 years, I feel
Mhm.
like a lot of the soft goods industry has been hijacked by these art schools that are selling fashion as art versus treating it
Oh,
as what it is, which is a trade.
yeah. I That's interesting point that you bring up because it like I'm sure you've seen the show Project Runway. Um that's a really popular fashion show, and it is fascinating the artistry that goes behind it. But when it comes to the industrial side of things, it's very important in terms of where these materials are going and what they're being used for. So they're not only used for PPE, they're also used in, maybe the seating that goes into automotive or even aerospace, because the astronauts have to sit on something, and they also need their
Ex-
suits, their uniforms. So
exactly.
that's such
Exactly.
a go
So
ahead.
I feel like, especially now with AI, the next frontier for soft goods, I think it's going to, well, it already is robotics.
Okay.
So you have all these projects for robotics,
Mhm.
for example, not enough people with the right type of experience. I mean,
Yeah.
if you don't even know the principles of what to do and why, uh you're not going to learn that in school. You're not definitely most definitely not going to learn that in college, because
Right.
it's you have to be, it's a different mindset. Okay, so I was very fortunate where, first of all, it grew as a hobby. I didn't
Mhm.
I I wasn't one of those kids that was like, oh, I want to be a famous fashion designer. No, 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 no. It just kind of evolved. Like, I went from these are my toys. This is my hobby. This is how I'm making money in high school. Okay. So by the time I finished high school, I had already decided that I wanted to start my own business. Now, the one thing that was life-saving for me was that I was, even at that age, I was self-aware enough to know that I was going to have to learn from someone else, learn on the job, before I even contemplated setting up my own business.
Where did you get that education though? Was it strictly from your mom who also knew how to sew, or where did you go?
Well, first of all, I moved around a lot. Okay, through life, I was born in New York. Okay, when I was 4, my parents decided that my parents are from Mexico City, so they decided they wanted to go back and set up a business there. So when I was 4, we moved back to Mexico City, and I started kindergarten there. Okay, I didn't even know Spanish that well at the time, so it was a learning curve. Okay, but perhaps because I embraced change at such a young age. Change is my normal. Okay, constant change is my normal. So I had to learn learn the language properly. Okay, and then I lived there for 11 years. Now, I was lucky that in those days, at least, it was the public education system was very good in the sense that it was a true meritocracy. Okay, so in those days, the public schools got their funding based on average GPA. All right.
Okay.
So the most sought after schools, because over there you have the option to apply, for example, for junior high, the junior high, and every parent wants the junior high that has the most modern facilities, the best teachers, because there was a lot of teachers from private schools, very expensive private schools, that also get to teach there. So because it was always a meritocracy, I basically got used to competing and achieving since I was in kindergarten, because even for kindergarten, they would give you an admission test.
Interesting. They don't do that a lot.
Yeah. So that taught me that, okay, they're not going to take your word for it. You got to show, you got to constantly perform and show them that you can do this. So, that's just the mindset I grew up with. In 1985, there was a huge earthquake in Mexico City. I believe it was 8.1. I've never felt anything like it again. Okay. It's just that was the worst earthquake I've ever been through. I mean, it's estimated anywhere between 15 and 20,000 people died, because it was total destruction, in certain parts of the city. I was lucky where, my school didn't completely collapse, but yeah, we couldn't go back to the same school. We had to go back to temporary classrooms. Okay. But that sort of like gave me a sense of urgency as well. Because that's when I realized, okay, you know what? If I procrastinate on things, I may not be around tomorrow to finish them.
Yeah.
So that gave me a sense of a constant sense of urgency. So because of that, when we moved back here, my mom ended up remarrying. I mean, because my parents divorced when they moved to Mexico. That didn't last long. And then she remarried, and I ended up moving back here to LA, and my sister went to live up north in San Jose. So what happened there is that's when I started, making money, selling my designs to the popular girls. But that's also when I met, in my senior year, they had this program where you could start college before graduating. You got credit for it. Just like Driver said, you got credit for starting college early on. So I befriended in my senior year. I became very good friends with this German foreign exchange student. And it's just different culture, different mentality. And we got on really well. So, he was like, you should start college. He goes, you might as well just take some fashion classes just for a laugh. So, and that's exactly what I did. So my first semester, I was still in high school, but I think I took all the fashion related classes and a couple of electives that had to do with business. And then I took about 25 units in one semester. I went nuts.
You did.
Yeah. But that experience made me realize very early on, oh, so you mean I don't need to get a degree? Because as soon as I finished that semester, I got my high school diploma, and then I thought to myself, okay, well, I might as well just, try it out, try to find the jobs with after taking these classes, see what comes up. So I came to stay with my dad in LA. And I started looking for work, and, I got hired. And then once I got my first job in the industry, I was like, I don't need to go back to school. I most certainly don't need to get a degree. And because you could say that in some ways, it's almost like I saw it as, okay, I was getting paid minimum wage, but I didn't care, because in my mind, it's like, oh my God, I'm getting paid to learn. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm getting paid to learn. Well, if I go to college, it's costing me. So I just didn't. Once I went through the first semester, I realized that college was not a very good investment for trades. You don't need a college diploma for a trade. And I think that's at the base. That's the baseline of where the problems have started with the trades.
Well, and I see this too, where, you have all these advanced technologies versus the hands-on skill sets. And there's this push where, from my observation, and people can disagree with me, and that's totally fine, there's this push to automate a lot of the hands-on skill sets. And there's an argument behind it where, if we automate these repetitive, mundane tasks, that opens room for humans to do more complex things that take more problem solving and critical thinking, which, yeah, that's true. But not everybody wants to do that kind of work. I feel like there's still a set of people that like making things with their hands, that like the craftsmanship behind it. I feel like it's still important. I don't know a lot about the textile side of things, and maybe you can provide some clarity for me. But I mean, you have a career that spans 35 years, and in our initial conversation, and as you just mentioned earlier, like, you've been around different areas of the world, and you've been in different cultures. So that global experience, what did that teach you about the difference between design intent and industrial production reality? Like, what did that teach you?
Well, what I learned is that culture plays a huge part in the way we communicate. And I'm talking beyond language. Okay, I'm different. Language aside, even the way we capture context. For example, for a Japanese person, they interpret things differently. And it has nothing to do with the language, and a lot to do with the cultural differences. Okay, so one of the first things that I noticed was, and it didn't really click. It didn't make much sense to me until I had been to, I would say, maybe about half a dozen countries, where I noticed the same pattern where, Americans would go to these countries to do quality control or production manager or whatever, and they would expect everyone to act American, think American, behave American. That never made sense to me.
Mm-hmm.
That never made sense to me. But it's almost like I didn't know how to process it.
Mm-hmm.
Because to me, it just didn't make sense. I just didn't understand the reason why I was different. It took me a while to figure out, oh, okay, well, yeah, all this early exposure to different cultures has shifted my thought process, my methodologies in a lot of ways. And that's something that I didn't really, I wasn't aware of the impact it had in me until I was probably in my mid 30s. But I mean, that's the part that, okay. And that having sort of like started in the industry in LA was also hugely advantageous because the city is so culturally diverse. I feel looking back, like it was kind of like a rehearsal of what's to come later with me going to these countries. It was almost like a rehearsal because you get conditioned to dealing with different people, different personalities, different cultures, different languages, and you kind of have to like make it all work somehow. So I feel like that was a huge advantage that I started in the business in this place that is so diverse. But, and it was also advantageous that at the time, we still had a lot of manufacturing going here in LA. I mean, it wouldn't be unusual for me to, when I started in design, and then from there I moved to pattern making because remember, I realized very early on that I wanted to start my own business. And I felt like I had to experience all the facets of the business so that later I could make good decisions in hiring when I had my own business. So for me, it was like, it was fairly straightforward in the sense that I didn't have to spend too much time finding my way around the industry. And for that reason, I was very fortunate that I got to work with a lot of companies that were still manufacturing here for the most part, and everything was here. You had the dye houses here. You had a lot of, textile showrooms here. I mean, you could literally have, do a sample in a couple of days, in a day. You could source, sample, and have a product ready for manufacturing in 3 days, in those days. Okay. And you would just go pick up your fabric, boom, cut it, sew it. Your production is ready in a couple of weeks. And that's what I got used to. I just didn't know anything else until I started traveling overseas, and I started noticing that more production started moving. First, it was the production. And, in some ways, okay, it makes sense financially when you're running like millions of units. Okay. It makes sense, right? You would move certain products. You would outsource offshore certain products. But what has never made sense to me was outsourcing the product development part. That never made any sense to me. Well, because remember, I never knew an environment where you expect people to understand what you want with images. Sounds so foreign to me because I never experienced that. When I started, for many years, every brand that was manufacturing here had the product development always took place in-house. Why? Because they understood that they need to own the patterns to react quickly to the trends. Because this was in fashion. So the one thing about that I can honestly say about fashion that it's very different, you have to do so much so fast with so little that, you know, it conditions you to spot waste. You know, when you have experience looking at the whole process from sketching on a notepad all the way to shipping the product to the retailers, I mean, it definitely you're able to identify exactly what works and why, but you can't do that if you've never set foot in a factory, for example, if you've never set foot in the shipping department, if you've never set foot in a development facility where you have the sample makers working right next to the pattern makers. Any questions, anything they may have, okay, you get up, you ask the pattern maker, you solve it right there and then. The pattern maker makes notes or changes on the pattern, and you move on and finish the sample shortly. That's it. None of this, you know, going back and forth with thousands of emails back and forth for weeks or months. None of that. So, and again, that's why it never made any sense to me that companies would outsource the product development to whatever factory they're placing an order with. For me, I started noticing the change with fashion about 15 years ago. I started getting, you know, I started shifting away from it because, you know, I knew, I could see the writing on the wall. I mean, I knew it was already commoditized beyond any sustainable level. So that's when I started transitioning towards, you know, other soft goods products like, you know, technical gear or, you know, more utilitarian products, you know, even specialty products that, you know, for like, for example, I've worked on inventions for, I don't know, hospitals, for burn victims. I worked on, you know, heating or cooling systems for, you know, government applications, you know, across a variety of products because I never stopped learning. And it came to the point where I felt like, okay, fashion. I've been in fashion for so many years. You know, it's dying a slow. The creative part of fashion, there's no innovation anymore. So I thought, well, where's the innovation going right now? And that's when I realized, okay, I better start shifting my focus towards other type of products. But if you only ever went to school for fashion design and they only ever teach you how to draw, how to put together, you know, a storyboard, and, you know, maybe you learn how to use, you know, your home sewing machine well enough to, okay, maybe just, you know, do some samples for the fashion show at the end of the year, for the graduation fashion show. That's not gonna help you much in finding work.
Right. So can you dive into the Sewing Incubator? Like, what is it? Why did you start it? What are some of the things that you're doing with it? Like, what was your whole mission behind starting the Sewing Incubator?
Yeah, well, when we started in 1998, it was a completely different industry. We started out just offering digital services. We were one of the first service providers that with a website in LA. I mean, this is at a time where we're still working with dial-up modems, and, you know, not too many people knew what an email address was. You know, they were looking at you all weird when they saw the little squiggly thing on your business card. So, I mean, we were very early in that wave. So because of that, we started getting work from companies in Europe that just couldn't find people that could do digital patterns at the level that they did. So that created, so one of these clients made me an offer I couldn't refuse. So I used to go back and forth all those years. But, you know, when this client made us the software, I made the decision to permanently move to the UK. And that like opened up my eyes in terms that I had worked in different countries by then, but I had never sort of like gotten to experience every facet in Europe. It was always I had always been more focusing in production, but
Okay.
this experience allowed me to see the whole process from beginning to end. But what I noticed is that in comparison, American brands are very wasteful. Like, and it's just the little things, but it adds up to a lot. Like, for example, for photo shoots,
Mm-hmm.
in those days, the American companies I worked for, they would have a photographer and a set, and they would organize the photo shoots, and they would have a stylist. And UK companies, no. What stylist? What is that? You're not in Hollywood anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Everything. And I saw so much waste in American companies, the processes, that's when I realized that how helpful it is when you have a solid system. You can
Mm-hmm.
do a lot more with a lot less. In the States, in comparison, I would see, the larger brands, they did invest a lot of money in technology, but it was almost, sometimes it just felt like somebody just said, oh, let's get this new system because everybody else has it, not so much because it's a good fit for us.
Yeah.
In general, like, just things just felt more over time. It just started feeling like things were getting more disconnected here compared to the smaller European brands. But that also made me realize that, the internet was going to change everything.
Right.
And I had to basically start changing my workflow too. And that's something that, not too many people in the industry were eager to do, because everybody, would be afraid of technology. And
I think they still are to a point, but
yeah.
So what were some of the major changes then that you've made since starting in 1998?
Well, I think the main reason why I started it is because at the time we were one of the first ones to like be fully integrated from the ground up to work with anyone in the world. Okay. For the most part, you had to, sure. If you were working, for example, if you were manufacturing overseas, everything would be sent through the mail, and then sometimes you would go on site, take a trip there, take a week or 2 weeks trip over there to be dealing with the factories, and we didn't do that. We started, emailing patterns, and we started, basically really immersing or integrating a lot of technology. So that's why we grew so fast, because there were no physical barriers that we were not willing to go around. Most companies didn't behave that way. Most companies were still, okay, well, all we do is manufacture, all we do is make patterns, all we do is design, the segmentation. And I started thinking, okay, well, what is the difference between some of the best factories I've seen in Asia compared to what we have going on here? And the difference was that in Asia, you have factories that, in the best ones, always have the product development in-house. So I started noticing that in some ways, we started going full circle in a way with the factories. So when I also started noticing, obviously, the type of clients that we started working with started changing, because it went from, okay, So when we started, I was working with peers. I was working with production managers. I was working with, designer merchandisers for development. I
Mm-hmm.
was, but they were all peers, industry peers. Then when the internet became popular, then the kind of person that started approaching us didn't have an industry background. And we noticed that shift. I mean, it started with, for example, the emergence of the bloggers. Um, and then when Project Runway came out, that sort of like created this glut of people who all of a sudden wanted to be fashion designers, right? So
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
that started, but then social media came and that changed everything because now everybody wants to be a designer.
Mm-hmm.
So we started noticing that more brands started sending everything overseas, but more people with that industry background, more consumers started
Mm-hmm.
approaching us wanting to work. And I did start notice that all of these consumers that now wanted to launch a product always had the same questions. So, and I just kept repeating myself over and over again. So that's when we made the decision to take a more educational approach because the
Okay.
industry has been so disrupted now that that's how that's what we decided to do because I could see the change coming.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that you are really trying to advocate for, and you talked about, is training the next generation of technical professionals to combat disappearing skill sets. And I agree. I think sewing is one of those disappearing skill sets, unless it's like how you started, where it's a hobby. Like, I don't see a lot of like, and maybe this is just my age, or maybe it's because it's never been a hobby of mine, but I don't see a lot of like sewing toys. So like we always have this concept of play, and like kids, what they play with at younger ages can tie into what they do in the future for future careers. I do want to take a quick moment and say hi. LinkedIn user, my apologies for my tardiness. Happy to be here. Thanks for having me. Thanks for coming. I don't know who you are, but if you want to drop your name. And then
Hi.
Hank, hi Hank. Aiden and I finally made it. Yay. I hope the girls are doing well. I hope I don't know if they started school yet. We start school September 1st. But which skills in your opinion are most at risk right now when it comes to the ones that are disappearing?
Huh. You know, the sad thing, I don't think it's so much of a skill problem. I think it's
Okay.
more of a mindset problem. Okay.
Okay.
So think about it. If your parents, if all you ever hear from your parents is, oh no, you have to go to college, only the losers end up working at a factory. That's for
Mm-hmm.
losers. Nobody wants those jobs, and the parents have this image like of the that hasn't been relevant for a long, long time of a factory of
Mm-hmm.
what a factory's job is supposed to be. So I think I am now convinced that it's more than anything, it's a mindset problem. Okay. Even okay, so for example, I came across a really, really disturbing TikTok the other day because there's this gal that, she's got a very interesting podcast, and it's all about, basically I feel like she's exposing how for most jobs you don't need a degree. You may need a license for some, but the
Mm-hmm.
one disturbing fact that she was talking about the other day is that they did this questionnaire around the world, and basically around the world, it's not just here, for the most parts, like kids in school they all want to do the same 10 jobs. So
Interesting.
because they don't know, they're not aware of all the other jobs that are available. Even in fashion, I mean, even if if you just want to focus on fashion, let alone other types of manufacturing, okay, but just keep it simple here. If we focus on fashion, I never get asked, hey, how can I become a pattern maker? How can I become a grader? How can I, become a sewer, an industrial operator? People don't ask that. Why? Because they don't know that the jobs are there. They don't know they're available. So that's on one hand. On the other hand, I feel like the parents have this idea, there's this stigma attached to the trades that a lot of the parents won't let go of. Okay. And then there's also this, particularly when it comes to sewn products, because fashion was the main entry point as far as education goes. It was the main entry point into soft goods. But now that it's being hijacked as art, you're not learning it as a trade anymore. You're learning it as an illustration class.
That's interesting.
So that's where I know one of the main problems is, but I do know also that, in school, I mean, listen, I don't have kids, okay? But obviously I talk to a lot of parents who contact me because their kid wants to be a designer. Oh, is this a good school? Is this a good college? My answer is always the same. You don't need to go to college. You don't need to get a degree. Because it is helpful to go to college because it does give you some structure, but you don't need to get a college degree. And I realized that a lot of these kids were being duped basically into committing to these student loans for a curriculum, for a diploma, and a curriculum that is not going to teach them anything helpful that can be useful to find a job. And that always, irritates me. So, but then again, you also have a lot of parents enabling that because they think,
I think we were sold this idea that if you go to, and I'm only speaking from personal experience, and I'm not dogging university education completely. I think it is a fit for some people, and there is a need for it in certain areas and environments and career pathways. For me as a tech writer, did I need to go to college as long as I did to get a master's degree in it to be a good writer? I don't know. That's still up for debate, in my opinion. Has it helped me in my career? Yes, I think so. But I also think what would have helped me flourish a little bit more sooner, because I'm in my early 40s and I feel like I'm just now starting to hit my prime in my career. And I think I could have done it a lot earlier if I would have had hands-on experience, shadowed someone else who was like in journalism or technical writing, and even had like some business class experience, because I think that is a main component. If you want to be successful and start your own thing, you need to know what business vocabulary is important and how to do finances and all that. Like, I think that's important. But I think if younger generations who like to work with their hands and have a good work ethic, then they shouldn't be pressured into going to college. Like the high school I graduated from, they had a welding class, and their welding teacher was actually a former naval officer. He was a certified welder inspector. So he made sure that each one of his students had welding certification before they graduated. So when they did graduate, they could at least apply for that very initial like starting point in welding if they wanted to do that. And I think that is where we need to differentiate some of these things. Not everybody wants to have an advanced degree, and not everybody wants, but there is a gap on what people learn at. So like with my daughter, for example, she's going to nursing school. She decided to do the 4-year path. And I feel like she could have been a lot further in her career if she would have went the vocational school route. because then she's skipping all of like the lectures and stuff, and she's actually getting that hands-on experience sooner. So I
Yeah.
think it's the same with textile manufacturing. Um, and you're a prime example of that. You didn't have to go to college to be successful in what you're doing.
No. I mean, so I did one semester, and after that, I tried to go back, but to be honest, I just couldn't be bothered. I mean, I took a couple of classes after that, and I just kept taking classes of like, for things that I found interesting or useful. But no, I completely lost interest in getting a degree or anything like that after that first semester in high school.
So what opportunities do you think we have then in the United States to sort of resolve that or change it? Like, what are you
No,
seeing
I
work?
do. I still believe that this is the land of opportunity. Okay,
Mhm,
if only the
mhm,
government saw it that way too. If only we could get half of what they give to the university, the
mhm,
colleges. If we could only get half of that for the trades, we would be golden.
mhm,
We would be golden. But that's not the case. And we have this mishmash of state regulations that they're all different.
mhm,
Okay. And for example, in California, I looked into starting an apprenticeship program for
okay.
to teach people how to do things my way. Okay, which
Yeah.
is really the way that I've seen work everywhere. In many countries.
Mhm,
Um, but they make you jump through so many hoops. Okay, number one, and number two, it's almost like you gotta convince. At the end of the day, it boils down to, and this is gonna sound harsh, but this is the reality that I'm dealing with.
mhm,
I would have to jump through hoops to convince some bureaucrat who has never even set foot in a factory, let alone even know what this industry is all about. I would have to jump through hoops to convince them that
mhm,
my apprenticeship program is good enough to get it certified.
mhm,
Okay. So that right there shows you that, they just, I feel like after a while, I just gave up on it. It's like, you know what? There's no incentive for me to do this. The unless you get it certified. And to get it certified, you have to jump through all these hoops. So I was like, no, there's going to be another way. So that's how I came up with, and this is something that I just started on. I did a soft launch in June for pattern
mhm,
making. So basically, I've known for a long time now that just learning how to use a software, for example, is just not good enough, because
mhm,
you got one thing that I always helped me. I always ask why. Okay, for me, it was never enough to just have the answer to something. Okay, I always had to understand it and ask why. Okay,
mhm,
um, and when you start answering the whys, you will find that you will realize that just skills alone are not going to do it if you can't find a way to put those skills to work for you to generate
mhm,
revenue. Okay.
mhm,
Um, so my program, it's a whole system to not just learn how to use software, but also, okay, so this is how you're going to do this because. So I'm already answering all the whys before they even ask them.
mhm,
Okay, so that they can understand how one thing leads to another and why that works. Um,
mhm,
schools programs are not set up that way.
mhm,
School programs are not set. Well, apprenticeships right now, even if I was to get mine approved, chances are most businesses are setting up apprenticeships in a way that, you know, it's basically teaching you like the task that you need to perform to, for example, get a job there. but it's not necessarily going to be able to those are not necessarily transferable skills all the time, because you will have companies with apprenticeships and they teach you how to use the software, and then when you move on to another company, guess what, you have to learn a different way of doing things because that software is different, or they have a completely different system or way of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm about to, in the next couple of months, I'm going to start hosting development events, so that a small group of people can literally come into the factory and see their idea, their product being developed from beginning to end. They're going to come in with an idea. We're going to sit down and analyze it. What are the goals? Okay. They're going to draw it. Okay. With my guidance, they're going to start, have to being forced to think about the technical specifications and all of that. Mm-hmm. And then the next session, they're going to put it all together for the pattern maker to make a pattern. Okay. We're going to review the pattern next to the specifications, what they requested. And then the last step is to have their sample sewn. And after that, we're going to review their sample, and we're going to see what they missed, mm-hmm. or what they didn't miss, or things that they hadn't thought of, or even more improvements to make. Basically, I'm literally taking them through the entire product development process over a period of 4 sessions, 4 weeks.
That's awesome. And it's important too, because a lot of communities, so for example, I mentioned the sewing class that I took earlier in like 7th grade. I don't even think that's available anymore. And I think they're getting rid of those types of elective classes. So what the work you're doing is really important. Hank did mention, I'm so glad to see changes in the trades. I'm seeing more government funding in Canada, and more mm-hmm. importantly, more women getting into the trades. I feel like our government, they say they're funding certain programs, and I think they are, but one of the things that they started defunding was the manufacturing extension partnerships.
Yeah.
And some of those had to close. So it's kind of a confusing time here in the United States on what the government is actually supporting versus not supporting. In terms of the future for soft goods manufacturing, Rocío, what are you looking forward to the most? And do you have any advice for communities in terms of like what they can do to really bring back the educational portion of it and getting kids involved in soft goods manufacturing? Because I feel like the skills that they're acquiring and the critical thinking and problem solving that goes with it is mm-hmm. important in terms of the labor challenges that we're having right now, and the opportunities we're missing out on right now. Because as I mentioned before, we kind of outshored a lot of the textile manufacturing here in the United States. And I think maybe there's an opportunity to bring some of it back. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, with certain products, I mean, when it comes to commodities, no, we just can't work to those prices. But when it comes to certain specialty products, like for example, we have a handful of clients that there's mainly 3 of them. Okay, we've been working with the last one. We started working with them about 3 years ago. Okay, and just to give you an idea, this is a very specialized product for sports. And the first year, first of all, he had been trying to make a sample on his own for about a year and a half. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then I managed to develop his prototype in about 2 to 3 weeks from when we started working together. I mean, mm-hmm. the first time he saw the prototype, he was a little taken back, only because it was so different from anything else out there that it's supposed to solve the same problem he's solving. And I was like, well, yeah, it's going to need some education, mm-hmm. but you know what? Once you show what it can do, the level of protection that they're getting, nobody's going to question how it looks, how different it looks. So the first year they order about 1,000 units. Okay. The second year they started ordering, averaging about 1,000 a month. Okay. This year, they've doubled that. We're doing about 2,000. Next year, we're projecting about 5,000 units a month.
Wow.
Okay. But then again, they could probably grow faster if it wasn't for the fact that we have to find people, test them, and then train them, and only then can we start planning the next growth phase. The fact that I see more classes popping up for kids, very, very encouraging. And I just came across an article the other day that was talking about how people are putting a lot of money into hobbies these days, and sewing is taking a big chunk of that. So there's definitely a lot of interest from kids who want to learn how to sew.
That's refreshing to hear.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, so that, to me, that's very, very encouraging. And you know what? I've always said that, the industry, I've always said that as long as you can train someone, you can have a business here. You can have a sewing business here, because there's always going to be a place for innovative products. But more recently, now everything has to be done faster, because if you're selling through social media, I mean, you can't quite plan things a year into the future. A lot of times, like these clients are doing, like I said, monthly drops. Okay. Sometimes they're doing a drop every 2 months. So if you're not able to produce within 3 to 4 weeks, you can't, you're not moving fast enough. And the other thing about that type of model, they don't have to discount.
Oh,
you take it or leave it. Yeah, because if you don't buy it, it's going to run out. It's going to run out.
Yeah. I wish I knew how to sew better, because with my 2 kids, my 2 little boys, well, my daughter's an adult, but my 2 little boys, like, they go through clothes like crazy because they're feral. And I know I would save a bunch of money if I could just patch things up. But again, I'm horrible at it. I don't have the skill set. So I always buy, like, you would have probably made bank on me a long time ago.
Back in the day.
Back in the day, I would have been hiring you left and right to, like, help fix my kids' clothes. It's ridiculous. Well, Rocío, we are coming up on time. Hank just put another comment in. My daughter took a course for sewing, and she now has a sideline business sewing, and is also co-manager in a commercial tarp shop locally here, making truck tarps. She's now teaching the girls to sew. Hank, that's awesome. I love that. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm telling you, like, some of these trades that are disappearing, if you can master them, you can make really good money. He says she loves what she does and really enjoys teaching new employees. That's cool. She should connect with Rocío, and maybe.
Yeah, but you see, the mindset. She has the right mindset.
Well, Rocío, we're coming up on time. Is there any final thoughts that you want to leave our guests today? What's one key takeaway you hope the audience takes with them today?
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of parents watching us, and my suggestion would be, if you see that your child has a natural interest in sewing or making stuff with their hands, encourage them. Even if it's just a hobby, encourage them. It's still a lot better than them being on social media the whole day. So I think that's a good alternative for a hobby.
Right, I agree with that. Well, Rocío, thank you so much for joining me today on Mavens of Manufacturing. I really enjoy you.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much. I was really looking forward to this.
Yeah, maybe I can come out to California and you can teach me a couple of things about sewing, because I'm telling you, man, I need to know on so I can save money on my kids' clothes. That's ridiculous. But to everyone tuning in, thank you for tuning in. Our next episode will actually be at the end of September. I will be at IMTS. If you notice the Omega Cool logo at the top, that is the sponsor for today's video. They actually sponsored transportation for the team that I mentor in robotics, Turtle Tech. So they will be coming to IMTS with me. I'm super excited about it. I hope you guys have a fantastic weekend. Please connect with Rocío. She is on LinkedIn. I will make sure to include her contact information to you in the show notes following this episode. I hope you guys have a great weekend. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
This has been another episode of Mavens of Manufacturing. Subscribe for more and make sure to tune in next time.